You know, I never hesitate to talk about when something impresses me. Sometimes you may even have to dish out an apology for even underestimating, and in the case of discussing anime and manga, this can happen a lot. Not all the time will your initial understanding or interpretations be correct, and in the case of ReZero, we are constantly pulling back layers. Season after season, we have gotten a constantly growing narrative that continues to show how moving a story can be in both the past and the present. With such a massive world and so many different backgrounds, Teppei has a plethora of avenues to take us down, in which I tend to find myself impressed with over time. Season 3 being the biggest clash of worlds yet, as this is the first time the royal candidates have been together again since season 1. A lot has changed in that time, some good and some not so great depending on the camp you're in. The royal candidate selection being at the center of the story has got everyone moving towards one point, and I can imagine that big power play moves for that throne are still yet to come. Now, if there is one camp that didn't initially have so much screen time and yet had a memorable first impression, it would be the Priscilla camp. Priscilla and Al were two characters that seemingly were as close of a duo just like Subaru and Amelia. I didn't necessarily have too much of a strong opinion outside of Priscilla having one hell of an ego on her, and Al is a pretty funny guy with so much cut content, thank you 2016 light novel readers, that all things considered, I probably wouldn't ever know his full potential. Truly, it's almost impressive in a bad way for how anime only folks will probably never know just how mysterious this guy is. Come season 3 and it would be the first time in 8 years that we would have seen them. Of course, this would apply to Anastasia and Felt as well, but this isn't about them today. Once again, their presence is felt in the room, especially considering they were uninvited guests. Priscilla still managing to ratio anyone who raises their tone at her, and Aldebaran still refusing to take off the damn helmet. At least Sho is still adorable even when he's dragging bodies across the floor. The conflict within the city on water certainly pushed the envelope regarding a lot of these characters' stories, and this was no different for the Priscilla camp. Sho being AFK in a shelter aside, there was a lot of interesting things going on with these two this season. I want to start with Al because boy, let me tell you, during my weekly watches and discussions, I only had one thought in mind when it came to him, and it's that this guy is sus as hell. For the longest time, we didn't know who opened the floodgates, who killed the Council of 10, and then he answers a witch cultist conversation mirror, and on top of that, there were a ton of dialogue moments that would be impossible to overlook. Statements like in episode 57 with "this isn't going how I was told it would," like brother, what do you mean by that? Who told you anything at all? Or in episode 65 when he raises his sword against Anastasia, even being able to perfectly be in the right place and right time to wake up Beatrice, making her even suspect of such timing. I can go on and on, especially with certain dialogue in his fight against Lust, but it all comes down to the fact that Al had a lot of hidden cards up his sleeve, and damn it, I could not grab any from his deck. I even hear that Al is one of the biggest mysteries of the ReZero world, which even got me more curious, and as I began to doubt that Priscilla would keep up, I was quickly proven wrong in her fight against Wrath, specifically in episode 60. It wasn't until after the episode and discussing with Asaratha HS that I learned that Iris and the Thorn King, Telios' Rose Knight, and Margritzer's Gibbet are references to the nation of Wallachia. And if there is one thing we didn't know, it's how these two ended up together and what their origins entail. Come post season 3, I was given a task to finally crack open the light novel side story of EX5, containing the origin story of this duo, and alongside it, I would also read The Day I Gave Up on Being a Following Star, Sunlight on the Water, and lastly, Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies. I took my time with this and took so many notes that it could be an entire script itself, but by the time I finished, I was blown away. Teppei is someone that clearly loves both his characters and this world he created, and EX5 is but a chunk of that passion put on full display. If I were to try and describe it, I'd say that EX5 is like ReZero's own Game of Thrones, but it only involves Wallachia and those who inhabit any territory within it. The politics go incredibly hard, and seeing how Priscilla, or in this story's case Prisca, came to be was an absolute thrill. At the center of this story lies the right of imperial selection, aka a battle of succession for the Wallachian throne. This entire conflict really broadened my understanding of Priscilla and her character. Being caught up in a battle among your siblings on top of assassination manipulation attempts and alliances is what sharpened Priscilla's instincts. I came to understand that her sharp tongue, her demeanor, her attitude, her quick-witted responses isn't out of arrogance, but rather they are weapons of survival. Not everyone can match her level of pressure, and in turn, that becomes her asset. Being able to assert yourself in front of your opponent, take control of the situation, gauge your allies' strength and value, these are essential to survive in this world and can be used all around the world as well. Not to mention her value of knowledge and literature hitting a very nice spot with me, as words being just as powerful of a weapon as her Yang sword is something I can value in a character. Combine all of this with her phrase of "this world bends itself to suit me," and I was definitely becoming a fan. Throughout this story, we see all of what it took for her to survive. Her allies like Arakia outplaying her sister and even being outclassed by her brother. One thing I do appreciate is how Teppei still managed to create this friction between the siblings that remained volatile to the very end. Despite the inevitable conflict, there were moments where working together would be of mutual benefit, but you never knew when the alliance would be cut off or even when a secret one was being formed. Bartroy being the real MVP of this whole conflict was an incredible surprise given his late game strategy with Vincent, and even Vincent himself being the big dog of the family surprised me with the lengths he went in order to spare Priscilla's life, going as far as to manipulate her right hand in order to kill her in previous name and lead to the birth of Priscilla. A loss of authority, freeing his sister from this conflict but also opening up new doors simultaneously. I never would have imagined that Priscilla's origin would entail her of being on the run and slowly bidding her time to regain her position at the top, having to marry over time for the sake of survival and transactions, but wearing the belt in the dynamic every time. I do gotta give my respect to Jorah given how he went out, and part of me wonders that in the climax against Wrath during the back and forth about love, is he possibly referenced not in a romantic way at all, but in the explicitly stated way of tolerantly accepting another despite their differences. I think it's fair to say that she did care for him, especially as he fulfilled his role. Her time with him will ultimately gain her new allies, such as the High Countess and eventually Aldebaran, and of course, nothing prepared me for Al's origin to be a gladiator on an island for slaves. Come this second half of EX5, I got to see another side of Al. It was evident that he experienced a tragedy with people who he couldn't save, and with more context given by Sunlight by the Water, I concluded to be delivered by Satella. It's no wonder he parallels Subaru so much, especially looking at the heroic delusion statement back in season 3. He was in a place of nothing more and nothing less, survive and simply fight to see tomorrow, but as I stated earlier, wherever Priscilla goes tends to change the very land, which also goes for its inhabitants as well. The revolution on the Sword Slave Island is an absolute narrative feast. I felt like a glutton on a Sunday brunch for how much I was enjoying this section of the story, as if the first half wasn't awesome enough. Being able to connect some of my notes from season 3 and apply it here really put things into perspective as to why I thought Al was so sus, but beyond that, I came to accept that Al is a necessary force. I refrain from using the term evil because while what he may do isn't the morally just thing, it does deliver results that are hard to go against. Him going from unwilling to fight to fighting a do-or-die battle against the strongest person on the island with Arakia is a hell of a flip side, but it shows that just like Priscilla, he still has the will to fight. Despite all that occurred, Al ends up becoming her knight at a later time, but from this moment Priscilla laid eyes on Al, it was only a matter of time. Even being her knight, it's really interesting how Al is probably one of the few people that Priscilla cannot figure out. Helmet aside, I can't even imagine what Al's true end goal is when it comes to the world of ReZero. It's evident that he's got a bone to pick with the witches, but how exactly will that agenda affect Priscilla and even the Subaru camp down the line is something I don't even want to begin predicting. Seriously, I'll be at the whiteboard all day. Yet for the time being, I really gotta hand it to this duo. I'm infinitely more interested in them now more than I ever was, and if White Fox was smart, they would bring all this content to the big screen. I think as it stands right now, the ReZero team is pretty hunkered down on the main story content, so if it were up to me, I'd collaborate with another studio for them to bring these side stories in between seasons, thus bringing in revenue and fleshing out these characters more before before the show gets too far. Not to mention, they'd probably have to have multiple movies per side story, which ultimately is a win-win for everybody. With all that being said, this was an exceptional side story that months later I find myself thinking about from time to time. Of course, if you'd like the full version of everything, I'll be linking a video in the description below from Asa, who covers this in much more significant detail. Part of me worries about the future of Priscilla, given for as long as she has possession of the Yang sword, I can imagine she will try to return home someday. But then again, the world does bend to suit her, so basically what I'm really trying to say here is, my bad you two, I was not familiar with your game.